Hello everyone, my name is Cameron Ayana and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a different book for us to read. Um, it's called Ecological Identity, Becoming a Reflective Environmentalist by Minchell Thomashow. What I propose, therefore, is very simple. It is nothing more than to think what we are doing. Hannah Arendt, The Human Condition. Introduction: Becoming a Reflective Environmentalist. 20 different people, 20 converging paths, an instant group, but not yet a learning community. The faces that enter this room reflect curiosity and anticipation, yearnings to explore how they arrived at this common trailhead. They wonder what they are walking into. John, a hazardous waste technician. He travels around the Northeast cleaning up toxic waste dumps. Sloshing around in the industrial muck, decked out in the full regalia of protective clothing, he is engaged in the grunt work of environmental pollution. Recently, as he was cleaning up a toxic waste site, 3 children looked at him from behind a fence, wondering when they could play in their field again. John wouldn't be here otherwise. As a select woman in small New England town, Betsy thinks she has seen it all. She understands the pressures of development and the importance of bringing new jobs to the town, but she believes strongly in the need for open space in in conservation. She assumes that she has balanced these concerns well, but one day a changing proposal crosses her desk. It threatens the integrity of her own special place, the land she walks for solace and inspiration. Steve is a political activist who has spent 20 years working in grassroots communities, listening to people voice their concerns about the health of their families and safety of their workspaces and the security of their jobs. While backpacking in the wilderness, he realizes that his passion for the earth is intricately connected to his political work in the city. The chairs are arranged in a circle, wide enough for 20 participants. As I arrive, I observe that I am subtly but carefully scrutinized. There are far, I mean, there There are some familiar faces, but many of these people are new to me. Students just starting their graduate program who haven't been in school for many years. They glance at one another, wondering who these new colleagues are, what they have in common, and what they might learn from their work together. Undoubtedly, they've been told by other students or by faculty advisors that my class will encourage them to look carefully at their environmental values. Yet they are not sure exactly what that means or whether it is even something they want to do. I teach a graduate class called Patterns of Environmentalism. Despite having taught this course for 15 years, I always grow somewhat anxious before the first meeting. I sense the excitement that pervades the students. I consider the extraordinary journey we will embark on together as our collective experiences unfold and we become immersed in reflection about the meaning of environmentalism. I know that I will uncover a range of emotional and intellectual impressions, and that all of us will emerge from the class changed in some profound way. It happens this way every semester. I ask the class members to introduce themselves, encourage them to tell about the paths that led them here, why they are in environmental studies, what they expect from my class, and what they hope to attain. I am always impressed by the diversity of their responses. Consider a typical class profile. There are environmental educators who work at urban or rural nature centers, sanctuaries, parks, and schools. There are policy people who work for the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, regional planning agencies, think tanks, advocacy organizations, private consulting firms, state and local government. There are people from the communications field who are writers, interpreters, museum designers, or who may be involved in the pollution control industries, or are involved with hazardous waste cleanup, water quality, or in any of the spiraling environmental science professions. New occupational niches have developed. People have found roles in organizations and have job descriptions that are not even conceivable several years ago. But there are also those new to the environmental profession, abandoning their former careers, making the difficult and risky decision to try something different, pursuing a professional direction reflecting their powerful environmental concerns. These include laboratory technicians, computer programmers, social workers, homemakers, carpenters, health professionals, and lawyers. Sometimes there are people still searching for appropriate career paths, thinking they might have found one in environmentalism. These people demonstrate courage in redefining their professional goals and aspirations. The first of the list of personal expectations for the class is equally long. Some people cite their interest in learning more about environmentalism, hoping this will provide a context for their own work. Others put it in more psychological terms, expressing the need to understand their deepest motivations and values regarding environmental issues, desiring to probe their experiences and feelings and make more sense out of them, wondering how they can more directly experience nature and apply those experiences to their professional and personal decisions. And there are some who aren't quite sure what to say, not yet able to articulate the psychological and philosophical aspects of their environmental experience. After the introductions are completed, I pause, allowing the class to digest all they have just heard. I observe that our small group is in many ways wait, a microcosm of environmental profession. Despite our diverse experiences and backgrounds, we are called to environmentalism not only because we want to make the world a better place or because we are interested in the subject matter, but because the ideas of environmentalism speak to something deep inside us. I reveal to the class that I am here for the same reasons they are. I want to explore why I consider myself an environmentalist, what this means in terms of my personal and professional choices, how I can use my environmental values to construct a personal identity. This class is a phase of a lifelong search to understand my place in the ecosystem, my role, and purpose as a human being. I need a strong and cohesive learning community to help me formulate these ideas. We all need one another for this purpose. The circle is temporarily quiet as we gaze around. As I look at the class, as the class looks at me, we realize that we are all searching for together. We see it in one another's eyes. We are becoming reflective environmentalists, and we will use our personal experiences and our interpretation of great texts of environmentalism as a means for common reflection. For most of my career, I have been teaching courses and facilitating workshops about what attracts people to environmentalism. Listening carefully to the interests and experiences of a broad cross-section of environmentally concerned people, echoes of nourishing and challenging decisions reverberate as I watch yet another group begin its journey. There was a woman in Prague who bemoaned the devastating environmental pollution of her hometown in Bohemia. The Arabic Israeli who recalled how every spring flowers bloomed on the thatched roof of his house and how his family made an annual barefoot trek to the shores of the Mediterranean. The busy executive director of a thriving environmental organization who wished she could spend more time in the mountains to nourish her soul, to appreciate the magnificent sensory environment. The environmental educator from California whose face came alive as he described what it is like teaching natural history to young children. But you don't have to be a professional environmentalist, or leave your job, or experience a life transition to have similar experiences. It is not just people in my class or students in environmental studies programs who have a desire to talk about these issues. There are hundreds and thousands of men and women and children who have a compelling urge to reincorporate nature in their lives, to have what they consider a direct experience of nature, and wonder how such direct experiences lend meaning to their lives. Whether it's a birder in tomatoes, I mean, a birder in Central Park, a business person on a rafting trip, a child growing tomatoes in an urban garden, or a programmer who enjoys backpacking, a lone fisherman on a northern lake. There are many expressions of this common impulse. Equally important is the perception of the threats to nature, which may be revealed in many different ways. The community member who is concerned about unplanned development, the parent who has been informed of asbestos in the local schools, the working person who is concerned about environmental hazards on the job, the student who learned about the ozone depletion in her high school science class, preparing to hike the trail. In this book, I reveal the depth of personal expression at the core of contemporary environmentalism. Many people experience an inner voice that compels them to explore their relationship to the natural world. Whether it is the joy and inspiration that accompanies a backpacking experience, or the sense of loss and despair about an endangered habitat, There are common experiences that not only motivate people to take action regarding environmental issues, to volunteer for environmental organizations, and to choose to enter the environmental profession, but often cause them to think carefully about the moral foundations of their everyday decisions. Indeed, these experiences of nature become a foundation for the merging of the scalar and the sacred, using the metaphors of ecology and environment. They, they constitute a common vision, an attempt to define the moral parameters for an ecologically sound way of life, and to use this vision to provide wisdom and guidance. This is the common trailhead, the place where many paths converge. To hike the path implies a searching process, a search to recover and reclaim the importance of nature in one's personal development. I suggest that this orientation and sensibility involves a reconstruction of personal identity, so that people begin to consider how their actions, values, and ideals are framed according to their perceptions of nature. This is the basis of what I call ecological identity work, using the direct experience of nature as a framework for personal decisions, professional choices, political action, and spiritual inquiry. Ecological identity refers to how people perceive themselves in reference to nature, as living and breathing beings connected to the rhythms of the earth, the biochemical cycles, the grand and complex diversity of ecological systems. In my classes and in this book, I provide a guide to the learning experiences that accompany ecological identity work. This represents a profound educational challenge for anyone who is interested in environmental issues. The necessity of translating the inner voice that yearns to speak with nature into a broad understanding of ecology, community, and citizenship. When the inner voice begins to speak, a learning space emerges, an opportunity for the cultivation of awareness. This book is about how to explore, interpret, and nurture these learning spaces. The openings made possible when people are moved to contemplate their experience of nature. My perspective is that this is most effectively accomplished when a person learns how to reflect on, discuss, and ultimately internalize the personal and public impact of environmental experiences, and to do so with both private and public life, in classrooms and town meetings, on street corners and in living rooms, on the trail or at the dump. Hence, my approach is both practical and theoretical. Ecological identity is sprinkled with activities and anecdotes, the real stories of everyday life, and the challenges and frustrations that accompany any new learning experience. It is a source book for personal and collective reflection about environmental issues. There are 5 perspectives or voices that characterize the flow of the book. Here is a description of what you can expect. I write about my experiences working with adult learners, graduate students who are or aspire to become environmental professionals, a broad array of people who enter the environmental profession because of a strong inner drive, even a calling to understand the meaning of their lives, to contribute what they can to promote environmental quality, and to claim a moral basis for their professional work and personal choices. Most of my career has been spent designing programs, courses, and curriculum to meet the needs of environmental professionals. I have found that the most critical component of their training is the ability and willingness to look deeply within themselves, to understand their motivations and aspirations, to clearly articulate their environmental values and know how to apply them to professional and personal decisions. Through a series of experiential learning approaches, I have become engaged with my students in the process of confronting these issues. These activities constitute an emerging text, a collaborative voice, a powerful means to bridge the inner and outer life of the environmentalists. I include many experts from student work. These are the stories of their experiences, the voices of ecological identity. I juxtapose these activities with stories of my own experience and the ways in which ecological identity work permeates my life. I have chosen ordinary circumstances, the kinds of things that happen to most people, discussions with neighbors, experiences in the outdoors, thoughts I have while driving to work, the dilemmas I face navigating the demands and responsibilities of work or parenting. These are the quotidian events and circumstances that I ordinarily take for granted. What happens when the lid is opened, when these experiences are subjected to reflection and analysis, and the political and ecological consequences of everyday actions are the subject of intense scrutiny? These personal stories make up the curriculum of ecological identity, the laboratory of learning. I introduce a scholarly interpretation, exploring how the collaborative voice of my students and my personal stories have a theoretical context. I describe how ecological identity is intrinsic to contemporary environmentalism, how it is a means through which to interpret the history of American environmentalism, an approach to carving out an environmental citizenship, and an orientation for how environmental studies might be taught. I weave a synergy of scholarship, a collage of collective stories, and theoretical inquiry. This appears recursive at times, as various themes unfold and reiterate throughout the book. The scholar in me delights in creating order and meaning, but this material is complex, and it rearranges itself in many different ways. I find that my book teachers, Henry David Thoreau, Gary Sitner, Joanna Macy, David Orr, Thich Nhat Hanh, Benjamin Barber, and many others pop up repeatedly, helping to create a collage of interpretation. I highlight many of the tensions, contradictions, uncertainties, and ambiguities of constructing an ecological identity. In the shifting terrain of postmodern life, it is not easy to navigate this terrain, balancing conflicting feelings about technology, politics, faith, nature, and humans. In this book, I try to bring these tensions to the surface by naming and confronting them. There are no easy answers, comprehensive programs, or miraculous blueprints that will guide us smoothly to an ecotopian future. Becoming a reflective environmentalist brings happiness and struggle, liberation and suffering. Many of the questions I raise remain unresolved. My strategy is to provide the learning tools that enable people to interpret these difficult questions, to bring them to the surface of their daily lives, encourage public discussion about them, emphasize their educational importance, and uncover the elegance of uncertainty juxtaposed with the strength of clarity and moral resolve. This book resolves around wait. This book revolves around learning activities that are designed to stimulate reflective, introspective analysis. I include these in the spirit of participatory learning to encourage mindfulness, ground discussion, and public controversy. Although I have used these activities over many years with adult learners in a graduate school setting, my students have applied variations in other educational and workplace environments. In elementary schools, nature trails, public forums, organizational retreats, family rituals, and so on. Certainly, I invite the professional educator to put these activities to good use, but I encourage all readers to consider using them, either in a public setting or as supplement to reading the book. In this way, the book becomes your text as well as mine, a hypertext, if you will, in which the full dimensions of your personal experience are linked to a unique, active, participatory interpretation. These perspectives or voices characterize the flow of the book. In a sense, the book is hologrammatic. From any particular section, the entire book may unfold. Of course, there are chapters and sections which serve to delineate the primary themes, but often I work with several ideas simultaneously, and throughout the book, they look somewhat different depending on the themes and the voice. I have arranged a linear sequence, and like most books, it moves from point A to point B. But I'm well aware that the busy postmodern reader will often scan a book, dipping in and out to find a unique path through the text. Each chapter has been designed as a self-contained unit, and although there is a logic behind the flow of the book, the interested reader can find many places to begin. In chapter 1, I explore some of the different ways that people describe their experiences with nature, the means of personal expression that constitute the voice of ecological identity, memories of childhood places, the perception of disturbed places, the contemplation of wild places. These are examples of transformational moments in people's lives when they realize that their personal identity is intrinsically connected to their direct experience of nature. Using these examples as a guide, I consider the significance and definition of ecological identity as a as an integrative concept and discuss some of its educational implications. Chapter 2 describes environmentalism as an emerging interpretive tradition. I show how Henry David Thoreau, John Muir, and Rachel Carson serve as environmental archetypes, and how they are important as ecological identity role models. How do their experiences, dilemmas, and struggles inform the work of contemporary environmentalists? If Thoreau, Muir, and Carson represent the roots of modern environmentalism, they are the foundation of a large tree. considering many branches reflecting diverse but integrated points of view. I describe an educational purpose in which people construct artistic representations of trees as a means of exploring the contemporary environmental spectrum, using the trees to search the movements and personal and collective reflective in which people create. Oh wait, moving. Using the trees to search the movements and organizations of environmental field. This suggests a process of personal and collective reflection in which people create individualized interpretations of environmentalism as a means of ecological identity work. The public expression of ecological identity leads to involvement in the political arena and immersion in the controversies that surround environmental issues. Yet many people are ambivalent about political expression, and there are good reasons why people avoid involvement in public life. Chapters 3 and 4 describe the intricate relationship between environmentalism and citizenship. Using learning activities such as the property list, the community network map, political autobiography, and power flow analysis, these chapters explore the integration of ecological and political identity, how to forge a concept of ecological citizenship, and how to formulate a political voice for environmental issues. Throughout the book, there is an implicit assumption that ecological identity work represents a process of personal and global healing. Environmentalists carry a profound dual burden. How can they at once convey a sense of wonder and appreciation about the natural world and also be the harbingers of impending doom, warming the world warning the world about ecological catastrophes? In Chapter 5, I suggest that this extraordinary psychological and philosophical challenge is a critical agenda for environmental organizations and is the basis of reflective environmental practice. Chapter 6 describes the relationship between ecological identity work and reflective learning generally. In so doing, it serves as an educational rationale for the book. This chapter includes the design criteria of 4 effective learning activities, what I call interpretive modalities, providing a short handbook for the educator and the concerned citizen. How do you develop vibrant and vital learning communities for ecological identity work? I suggest that 4 basic questions should be at heart of the environmental education. What do I know about the place where I live? Where do things come from? How do I connect to the earth? What is my purpose as a human being? I integrate these questions around the sense of place map, showing the ecological identity work belongs in the school, the home, the community, and the workplace. Who should I take this hike? Ecological identity is intended for several audiences. First, it is designed for working environmentalists who wish to look more deeply at the context of their work, where it lies in the broad spectrum of environmental thinking, how they might expand their concept of environmentalism, so it becomes a bridge between professional practice, personal lifestyle, living in nature, and political participation. Second, it should be useful for the person who is new to environmentalism, who is interested in some of the questions that environmentalism raises, and would like to look at them more carefully. In this way, the book serves as an introduction to contemporary environmentalism through the lens of ecological identity. Finally, it presents a challenge for the academic environmentalists, introducing ecological identity work as an educational basis for the teaching of environmental studies. In writing this book, I feel as if I'm exploring a rocky coastline. The material is a fractal. At every stage and scale, the shapes and structures form an inclusive pattern, but the landscape never looks quite the same. Each nook and cranny reveals more detail, more possibilities, requiring additional exploration. A coastline is infinite. Each chapter becomes a universe of learning. By covering such a widespread range of important views, I trip and stumble on a slippery slope. Yet this is the coastline that I choose to travel. I approach the journey with humility, always surprised at where it leads, respectful of how much I fail to see and of what remains uncovered. The most profound learning occurs through the process of the search itself. My wish is that this book serves as a tool for exploration, a handbook to the infinite coastline, a way of becoming a reflective environmentalist.